Welcome back to,
Bean stuff.
and I say welcome back. Well, this might be welcome for the first time. Thank you for coming back, or in coming for the first time here. We are on our second episode.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about, does the grinder matter?
Good question.
And full disclosure, we have recorded this. This is the second time we've recorded this episode. The first time we put music over it because we would try to be hip and cool.
Oh, it was good music.
It sounded good,
Yeah.
but you couldn't hear us.
No.
And then we couldn't get the music out of it. So, lesson learned. Lesson learned. But yeah, so we're gonna dive into grinders today. So let's just start it off.
Okay.
Is the grinder more important than the coffee machine?
Whoa, not many people ask that question, Reed. And I, through my experience now, I would tend to think it's as important. It may not be more important, but it is as important as buying the whole coffee machine, whether espresso, whatever you're buying.
So you'd say that not all grinders are created equal.
Unfortunately not. Others would have you believe their one's good, but no, they're not created evil.
You said evil.
Well, perhaps I was thinking that.
Wow. So what different? I mean, for those of us that may not know, what different types of grinders are there?
Well,
What are the options?
there's a lot of options you can go for. You can go from the real basic, and I would call that hammer and towel.
Which I have seen you do.
Yeah,
I think I've seen you do like shoe and towel,
shoe and towel.
possibly even rock and towel.
Yes, pestle.
I've seen mortar and pestle.
Yes.
I remember we stayed somewhere with someone that didn't have a
Sometimes
grinder.
you've got to, because grind is so important. You need to grind the coffee, otherwise the beans, and otherwise you won't have a good cup of coffee.
When you need to satisfy a need,
Yes,
you revert to whatever resource is necessary.
yeah. But typically
so, yeah.
typically out there is the blade grinder.
And that's why when I think of a grinder, that's not so much now, but that's kind of the first thing that usually pops into my
Yeah.
head. That's what you see at the stores. And
It's a very common one. It's cheap, which is it's probably one of its only positives that it's cheap.
but you can find them pretty much anywhere. Those are very common.
Yes, and like, once again, if you have to, I'd use it perhaps for a French press because that needs a coarse grind, and even then it's going to be inconsistent, which is its main problem. It's sort of like, I don't know what, slash and burn. No, that's probably not right. It's like, you have a what's you're doing the grass and you do the edges, the
Oh, like a
weed whacker.
yeah.
That's what they are.
It's not
The
necessarily
coffee whacker.
Coffee whacker. I like that.
Okay.
I like that coffee whacker. So you've got the blade grinder. What other
Yeah.
kind of grinders? Do we
Well,
have?
then you're going to move to the burr grinders, and with all these, you've got cheap ones, more expensive ones. There's imposter burrs.
What's it? Oh, imposter burrs. I think when we recorded the other episode, are you talking about plastic burrs?
Yeah, basically they give you the feeling you've got a burr grinder, which is what you want. But you look at them and they're either plastic or they're just indentations within plastic and bulges, and it really doesn't do any better than a blade grinder.
So as you step up from the blade grinder, you move to a burr grinder.
Burr grinder, yes.
And the burr grinder, within that realm of coffee grinders, there's a wide. It sounds like there's a wide spectrum of quality versus what you're actually getting. All that kind of
Yes,
stuff.
cost is a huge factor in that one. You go from you've got your flat and conical burrs, and then within that you've got steel and ceramic. So suddenly you've got a whole range, which is sort of exciting because you can buy a lower. These are good things to buy. You can buy a lower one, get used to that. Then as you're able to move up.
Yeah, and so we had this discussion. Maybe it was this morning or yesterday, but I want to go into flat versus conical.
Okay.
We had a discussion about a flat burr
Yes.
yesterday, which we can dig into. But I guess just can you describe what are those two differences?
Well,
there?
flat, as the word describes, it's really two surfaces that are flat, usually in steel, stainless steel, and they've got they cut very sharp bits throughout the blade, consistent bits, not like the imposters. And the coffee will go through these two very precise blades, basically, that are one may be stationary or they may be both spinning, and it'll come out consistent, which is what you want with coffee. You've got to have consistency.
So it's two horizontally opposed surfaces with teeth on it,
Yes,
essentially.
teeth, yep.
And those teeth can be set at a certain distance
That's
from
right.
each other, and then that's what kind of creates, so you can create, basically you won't have any grounds larger than whatever you set that opening. You might have smaller, but you won't have larger than that opening. And that's, so the flat is going to be that way, so horizontally opposed. Right. And then conical.
Conical, it's a similarity. Usually one's stationary, and you've got like a cone shape that then made of steel, usually again, that goes down into that other cone, and it again gives you a very consistent grind.
And one of the things, I think this is what I remember talking about at least, was that I had ground some coffee or something, and it came out. Anyway, we had talked about it, and the flat. I asked you the question. I said, "Does a flat burr, like when you're done grinding coffee, is there still remnants in there because it's flat? Does it hold remnants of coffee?"
Both conical and flat could. Flat more likely to it. It's sort of because the coffee comes down into the two flat blades there, and it then sort of does changes the angle, and that can cause coffee just to sit there and store there. Compared to a conical that sort of, especially a straight through conical, it comes through and you've got no coffee left. And the reason that's important, because you may be enjoying one coffee one day, and the next day you would say, "Oh, I want this coffee this time."
Right.
And you grind it, and guess what? You've had some of yesterday's coffee in it as well.
Well, and like we talked about briefly in the first episode, but the grind style for French press being very coarse.
Yes.
If you do a French press grind one time, and the next time you do a grind for, let's say an espresso, you could have different sizes within that first little pass that comes through.
That's right. And really, if you're changing the method from a French press, as you're saying, particularly to an espresso, you're going to have to just get some coffee going through first, just to make sure that there's not packed coffee in there, which means you think you've gone down to an espresso grind, but really there's still coffee that's holding the blades apart, and therefore got to get rid of that, to then the blades can come together, and consistently you'll get that right grind.
And this might be more of a rabbit, like maybe you're not going to notice it, or is it possible you may notice differences as you're changing between coffees or even grind sizes?
Yeah, you may not notice it that much, but if you're not, what do you call that when you're putting it through, so that you're getting rid of the old stuff and getting the new stuff. Purging, that's the word I was looking for.
So it's good to just do a purge.
Just a little purge, don't need many beans, but that means you got the size right of what you want, and also you've got the right coffee as well.
That's a good idea. So, I mean, whether you're using, because I think of even a blade grinder, like we talked about, a blade grinder being good for, or okay, I should say, for French press. Sort of, yeah. We'll let it slide.
Yeah.
A blade grinder, how many times have you opened one of those and you've seen so much like ground packed coffee?
Yeah, they pack the coffee, and you get these really coarse stuff, and you get other ones what they call fines, because it's so fine, it's so small, it's compacted. And that's for grinding. That's what you want to eliminate.
Right.
There's a science behind. There's a reason for that.
To eliminate the fines.
Yes, and the coarseness, and make them all consistent. The best way I can think about it is that inconsistency. The way you would know about that is, for instance, you have a glass of water, and you put some sugar granules in there and stir it up, and eventually, if it's warm water, perhaps it'll dissolve into the water.
Right.
If you put sugar cubes in, it's going to take much longer for it to dissolve in the surface area we're talking about. They've got way less surface area, so therefore the water's not going to get into that sugar as quickly.
Yeah.
If you've got both those things going on, you've got big coarse fellas, and you've got really fines, real small ones. You've got to have this whole inconsistency. As the water goes in, it's going to get some flavors out, and others it won't, and it's
so you're going to have a really inconsistent extraction of flavor from the coffee. Yeah. And kind of to touch back, so whatever grinder you have, it's good to do kind of like a purge of
helpful.
The next coffee you're going to be using, grind a little bit of that. Whether you have a blade grinder or a burr grinder, go ahead and use that at least to clean it out so it's the same. But with any grinder, you're looking for that consistency and the biggest piece of that is because if you don't have that consistency, I think of like a sugar crystal, like a big sugar crystal.
Yep.
Like I can imagine that not dissolving.
Yep.
And then, like you said, like the granules of sugar dissolve, and so if you have that inconsistency, you might have the right amount of coffee.
Yes.
But you may not actually get the flavor from, like, there's just so many variables. Like, you have the right amount, but not the right size, so you don't get the flavor. So
You're right.
It really does come down to being able to get a consistent quality from your grinder.
Yeah, and that consistency, unfortunately, moving from the blade to the burr, and then within burr, you've got a whole raft of quality in that. And one end, you're wanting some really good. I mean, you'd be talking. There's some really expensive grinder. You're talking, 4,000 or 5,000 plus.
Well,
Dittings. What's some other ones there? There's the Marconic. There's a whole lot of ones out there that are expensive.
Well, and I guess to that end, what are you looking for in a grinder? And let me kind of redefine it, because obviously you can spend $5,000 and know you'll get a good grinder.
Yeah.
Or
hopefully.
I hope. Yeah.
You can get a 5,000 burr grinder.
Yeah. So
5,000 blade grinder.
oh,
I should
well,
say.
good luck finding that.
Yeah.
But
They'll be around.
So you can spend a lot and know you're getting something good, but kind of across that spectrum, what I don't want to spend $5,000.
Right, no, fair enough.
And so if I'm going to go to look for grinders, what kind of things am I looking for in a grinder?
Okay,
Let's say I'm looking at even like Goodwill. I find there's probably you could probably find a good deal there if you keep your eyes peeled. But what are the things I'm looking for in a burr grinder to know? I know that it's maybe not going to be the best, but for the most bang for my buck.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can do some research in Google, and there's certainly makes out there that for a start are better. And as I was saying, you can get some that say they're blade. I'm sorry.
Burr
or conical. They say all that, but they're just plastic junk, really. And you won't pay so much, but you want to get one that actually has steel or ceramic burrs for a start. And there's some right now today. It would be round about. You want to spend, if you're buying it new, probably $130, $140
on the low end.
On the low end
for a halfway decent, consistent burr grinder.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and so it sounds like the things you're looking for are almost sounds like quality of the grinder components. Like like I know that you've had some, and I won't name brands, but like you've had some grinders that are kind of plasticky on the outside,
yes,
but on the inside they have like a steel burr, and maybe that's the way they cost savings of you not paying for this expensive external piece. But like, don't judge it by what its exterior looks like. Look at the burrs. Number one, what condition are they in? And what material are they made?
You can sometimes even conditions not sometimes. You can sometimes buy new burrs and you need to do that if you're doing a commercial thing. But you can buy new burrs for a home burr grinder as well. There are some known brands that are actually really good. I don't mind mentioning that Baritza has some of the Encore. That's where I started, and that was really good. You could go to a hand grinder,
right,
without no electricity now. And it takes a little while, but there's some good ones coming out with just hand grinders now too.
Well, and for anyone listening who hasn't gone camping with us, which is probably most people,
that's true.
You have a hand grinder.
I do.
That I feel like by the time you're done grinding it, you really want the coffee at that point. Like you better start grinding before you want the coffee.
You get up before everyone else and start grinding, as long as you don't wake them up, of course.
But you have that one, and it's. I mean, it seems like it's lasted forever.
It has, Reed. I have to say, it's an imitation burr grinder.
Oh no,
they're plastic, but camping even that's better than a blade, which you need electricity for.
I see a little bit of hypocrisy.
Yeah. Sorry, mate. I wasn't going to tell you that.
We'll gloss over that. We'll pretend like that.
What I said about manual grinders, though, now you can get good ceramic, stainless steel. You can get good manual grinders now. What I was looking at my day was pretty cheap, nasty stuff.
Yeah, so if you're at Goodwill, go ahead and take the hopper off and just see if they're metal. And that sounds like the biggest piece is just look for metal or ceramic, just not plastic.
Yeah. And
then there's so much you can go into as far as like the scale of adjustment that you have with it.
Oh, right.
Everybody makes a grinder that has a different, its scale of adjustment is different from the next.
Yes.
That's probably not as crucial as you're starting out.
Yes.
As long as it has the ability to adjust.
To change,
But if
the cheaper of the good style of grinders, of the burr grinders, they probably won't do your espresso, which is really sandy, thin sort of stuff. Some do, but you wouldn't want to do it all the time. They're really good for a pour over or a French press. They do them consistently.
Yeah.
But to get really fine Turkish, you're going to find they're going to have to be working pretty hard to get you a good espresso.
So it sounds like, and it kind of makes sense, I guess. But the coarser the grind is,
Yes.
the less expensive a burr grinder is. It's going to be more able to consistently provide a coarse grind as opposed to a fine grind. So as you go finer in your grind, you're going to need a better quality burr grinder.
You will, and that's where we were saying at the beginning that I think we said right at the beginning of, it's an important piece of equipment as you buy a real expensive espresso machine. You need to buy a fairly decent grinder, otherwise you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a double whammy too, because it gets quite expensive.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so I guess kind of looking at the notes here, you've written something I have no idea what it means. So
What's
I'll
that?
just say a word, and you tell me what you think.
What have I seen?
It says Encore.
Oh, I was working out. Encore is a Britza grinder.
Oh, gotcha.
That's what it is. That's the first entry sort of one from Britza. But you can sort of work out, it could last 5 years, which is quite good for a grinder, really.
Well, 5 years, how often are you
Well,
using
that's the
that?
point. You think about it, if you grind it, let's just say 4 days a week. And that means over that 5 years, you're going to have like, what I've written down there, 1,043 uses, which works out to 0.12 cents per day.
Per use.
Per use,
grind.
yeah.
Well, and that 10, 12 cents is not a lot.
No.
And when you compare that to, what you would pay at Starbucks or anywhere
Yes.
to buy coffee out, it's going to be a lot cheaper. I remember you and I one time.
Yeah, you were
This
good
is
at
a
this.
while ago.
Yeah.
We calculated.
Yes.
That
That was for the espresso machine.
That was for your old Rensselaer, wasn't it?
No. I think we were looking at the ECM at the espresso machine. It was going to be a little more.
Trying to convince mom.
Yeah.
But we worked it out, and it was just like ridiculously cheaper to get an espresso machine. Granted, ridiculously cheaper over the next like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I think we worked out.
But it's been 5 years now or so.
Oh yes.
So now we've paid it off, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're making money now.
I mean, making money every morning.
Yeah, that's part of the enjoyment of having the espresso in the morning. Now I think, I'm making money.
Making money.
Yeah, mate.
Sweet. So we've looked at kind of why it's important. We need consistency.
Yes.
On the cheap end, you're looking at just what kind of burrs does it have. One question that I kept coming back into my mind: ceramic versus steel or other metals.
Yes.
Are ceramic? To me, that sounds really brittle.
It does, doesn't it? No.
Is it brittle? I guess.
No. It's actually probably more quality than a stainless steel. It's
really.
Yeah, it's very it's good quality stuff actually. It's not. It'd be a bit useless. You grind your coffee the first time and you got bits of ceramic.
Well, I'm thinking like pottery.
Yeah. No, not like that. No.
Okay.
No, this is hard. This is good stuff.
So once you obtain this said grinder, this piece of your coffee entourage.
Yes.
What does cleanliness look like? I mean, I think of a blade grinder. I think of times I've seen blade grinders that have never been cleaned. But I'm assuming with a burr grinder, it's ever more important. The more you spend on something, the better care you should probably take of it, I'm assuming.
Well, true. Like a lot of things. Unfortunately, one of the downsides of a burr grinder, they are going to probably produce more grinds over the kitchen table, wherever you're grinding, compared to a blade grinder. Blade is sort of contained in the grinder itself, whereas a burr grinder, because it's putting so much friction and heat into the coffee, I guess you call it static, and it just sticks to everything, and suddenly you've got grounds all sorts of places you'd never expected.
And so, if you're especially doing a really fine grind, which you can't do in a
more force,
blade grinder, there's going to be a lot of coffee dust, we'll say, in the actual grinder itself that needs to get cleaned out occasionally, because that dust can get really into places.
It can. I mean, you can get really serious. I've at times even taken my dear old little Encore Baritza, and I've found screws in the feet. You've got to usually take the rubbers off the bottom, and you can find these screws in all sorts of places, and you can pull the whole thing apart. And
Yeah.
I'm always quite surprised actually where the dust gets.
Is it you find coffee deep?
Deep? Yeah.
So it's important to clean it, and that kind of makes sense.
Yes.
And because it is going to get everywhere. It's like it's a piece of machinery, and it's not going to operate well if it's not clean.
Yeah.
The thing you mentioned that I'm kind of curious about was static. I've heard it said before, like a blade grinder, when it cuts the coffee, can cause heat and all sorts of stuff. And you mentioned the heat of a burr grinder and static. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by static?
Static, I guess I'm thinking like you may have heard static electricity. It's sort of a thing where you rub rule or something on your sleeve and you rub it up and down and then things stick to it.
Like rubbing a balloon on your arm.
Yeah, exactly like that. And that's really the same principle going on here because things are rubbing very fast and with a lot of power, a lot of heat's generated. Suddenly it starts sticking all sorts of places.
So does that heat affect the bean?
It can do, and that's a part of you thinking when people are making grinders, they're thinking about how can we lessen the heat, which is why perhaps you go to a ceramic because it's less heat than stainless steel.
Right. Well, and does like the speed of the grinder affect that as well? Like
It
if you have
does.
a really fast grinder, it can pull a lot of coffee through quickly, or
Yes.
like is there different qualities of grinder have different speeds to them?
Yeah, it's a bit not too different from a car really of revs per minute and how the quality and the horsepower you're getting through that. So it can be a lot of things can be happening there that suddenly makes the coffee good or bad again.
Well, and that that $5,000 grinder we mentioned, I mean, it starts to make a little bit of sense.
It does, yeah.
Because it's like you can buy the right burrs, you can buy everything, the right adjustment, but if it doesn't have the horsepower or the RPM to support the beans, you can actually be burning beans or doing things with the beans that aren't quite good. So it's crazy how you can really get into some weeds with that.
You can, but you're beginning to sound a bit nerdy at this point. But when you're sitting and drinking your coffee and you go, "Wow, this is good,"
right?
That's a small part of it is the grinder and the type of grounds you've got
Well, it's not a small part. It sounds like quite a big part.
I like that, Reed. I was hoping you'd say that.
And the overarching theme seems to be you get what you pay for.
Yes, it does seem.
And you can pay a lot.
Yeah, you can. Now, just to go back on that a little bit, you sort of go, if you go up to, I mean, things change over time, but today, if you buy 400 plus, suddenly you are getting into a different realm that is pretty good.
Yeah.
And, you're going to consistently get good coffee coming from it. I'm thinking home more than commercial. Right. Commercial's a different thing. You are putting a lot of coffee through, a lot of heat going,
So, I mean, burr's the way to go.
Yes. Yep.
So can you walk me through dosing versus non-dosing?
Okay.
And then step versus stepless.
Okay, that's just two different styles of the burrs. It's not so much the burrs we're talking about now, but we're talking about the dosing. It's like a dose of medicine. It's how much you're pulling through. Dosing basically means you grind the coffee and it goes into a container. And a chamber, which then you can access that chamber and you dose out how much coffee you want.
And so I think of that in more of a commercial setting, but it could work for your home. But it's like it grinds into a little chamber, and at the bottom of that chamber, there's like a paddle that swings around and pushes the coffee out a little port. So you could grind. So if you have your friends over, you could grind a bunch of coffee and then just use that little paddle to shuffle it out the hole into your portafilter, tamp it, and go.
Yep. Compared to the non-dosing, which you just basically put your portafilter or whatever container you have underneath, turn the grinder on, and it comes out straight into your container. You've got to stop, of course.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to have a bit of a problem mess.
Well, I remember that Rancilio grinder you had for a while.
That was a good grinder.
It was a good grinder, but it did make a mess.
You can get a dose of that, though.
Oh,
I got the non-dosing one for home because I didn't really need it. I didn't really want to be...
Because that one was just an on-off switch, and it was...
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, that's another grinder that was a little more expensive. I think it was like, you're talking about, my day, I don't know, $400. Yeah. But it's a good, high-quality grinder that you get consistency with.
and I don't want to jump ahead, but the grinder that you have today, well, one of the grinders you have today, is self-dosing in a way. I mean, I guess maybe I'm using the wrong terms, but you put the portafilter in, and it actually weighs the amount it puts out and stops at a certain point.
Right, and this is a Britzer again, the SETI 270 WI. I standing for intelligent, and it is. And the W stands for weight, and there's 270 means 270 different options you have for the scale.
Wow!
So you've got a lot of options there. That's unique in terms of if you're making espresso, you put your portafilter under there, and it not just times it, which most grinders will start timing your shot. It weighs it as well.
Times the shot or times the coffee?
Times how long the grinder's going to stay on.
Oh, I see.
12 seconds, whatever it may be.
So it actually, based on the weight, will shut the grinder off.
Yep. For me, I like 18 grams, but when it gets 18 grams, it shuts it off immediately. It's very precise. And you just take it out, tamp it, you're away. It ruins you, I tell you.
It makes you expect that all the time.
Yeah, I put portafilters in coffee.
Have you ever turned a grinder on expecting it to shut off?
Yeah, and it just keeps going. Oh, what?
So, I mean, there's a really wide spectrum. You can have the dosing ones where it puts it into a containment place, and then you dose it.
Yes.
Or you can have the direct, or you can have it where it automatically puts however much you want.
Yeah, they're a little more expensive, but mate, once you've had that, you're ruined again. It's good stuff.
So you can really pick and choose what you want there.
This is the nice part where the realm we're in now, where you could do that, and that is, I'm enjoying that myself. You could go Breville, which used to do a lot, in my day, used to do vacuum cleaners and all sorts of stuff. They were really concentrating on coffee, espresso machines, grinders, and all sorts of things now.
Yeah.
But they've got a grinder now that does a pretty good job. Ceramic, it's
wow.
It's burrs. It's steel, I should say, but it's burrs, good quality.
Wow.
It's a good, easy to use grinder.
Nice. It's cool to see things become more publicly available or common.
That's helpful. Yeah.
And then so step versus stepless. What do those mean?
That's a pretty easy one. It just basically means whether the grind setting, you can have it on 6, 7, 8, whatever you have it on for an espresso, 6, then you go up to 30 for a French press, and it's just got little clicks, basically goes all the way up, stepping up to that. Or you can have stepless, which is just smooth. You don't it's probably got a line there telling you what it is, but you don't feel any clicks as such.
And I think of it kind of in terms of like analog versus digital.
Yeah,
like on your phone, you can click the buttons for volume.
Yes.
Whereas on some stereos, you have a volume knob that just smooths and goes all the way.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So we've got a lot of different things. I guess to kind of finish off, what are the different grinds, or what's the spectrum of grinds within coffee? And maybe that's a little vague, but like going from coarse to fine, what kind of coffees am I going to be using? Coarse, medium, and then on the other side.
Yeah. I mean, it's this general rule of thumbs, and with any grinding, to match your machine, you're just going to have to try things out. And you're going to get some bad coffee, some good coffee. When you find the good coffee, you just remember that, write it down, whatever it is, and say, next time I want to make it at a 9 for whatever espresso, and I want to make it 32 for a French press. But rule of thumb, very coarse. That's one end of the spectrum. That would be French press.
Okay.
And that's, I can't verbally say how that is. You can go online and see examples next to a coin and see how big it is or how small it is. But that is the bigger coarse stuff that a blade grinder you may get away with. I would suggest you using a blade grinder, shake up and down the blade grinder just to try and get it consistent.
Right.
And then as you move through, the other end of the spectrum would be probably Turkish, which is, as I was saying, like dust. It's very fine.
Right.
But typically it'd be more espresso, which is fine, not as fine as Turkish. So you're getting a lot of surface area, and the water gets into it very quickly, which is why an espresso, 20, 30 seconds, you're done.
Right. The time as opposed to French press being 4 to 5 minutes.
Exactly. It's got very much less surface area because it's coarse. And right in the middle there, you've got all the drip machines out there that will be in the medium coarse, medium fine, however which way you find best does it. and that's the Chemex, that's the cone, that's all these ones
like
in the middle.
Pour over that kind of fit into
Pour, yeah, very much so, yeah.
Because I guess pour over is going to be finer than French press because it's spending less time over the grounds. Yep. But yeah, okay.
It's sitting there, and well, it's not more time. French press, the water just sits there with it. Whereas a pour over, you pour the water over and it goes through. And once it's gone through, it's not sitting in the coffee anymore. It's gone through, and it's coffee now.
Yeah. So, kind of to sum everything up, if you have a blade grinder, well, think about a burr.
Yeah.
But coarse and French press is kind of where you're going to be sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Once you move up to the burr, don't go for a plastic burr. In the long run, it's probably going to be more expensive if it breaks or is not working. You're going to buy another one. It's like,
or you're going to have a rotten day because you've just had a bad coffee. Why? That's not worth it.
So go for a burr grinder with metal burrs or ceramic burrs, and then kind of from that point on, you're looking at what is your preference as far as dosing, those kind of things. You want to make sure obviously it's got the right pull through so it can pull the coffee through and all that kind of stuff. And kind of getting into those weeds, it's kind of more or less, just research on that front. But getting a burr grinder with
trial and error at that point, once you got to that stage, you're gonna know pretty quickly whether you've got over extracted coffee, under extracted coffee. You're gonna know.
Well, it sounds like you need a lot of coffee too, because you got to want to test that grind. You're gonna want to buy a bag just for grinding.
That's right. I would suggest making a roaster your best friend.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff, and I think that we could probably end there. I can't think. I mean, unless you can think of anything.
No. I think you covered the basics of grinding. It's an important feature that you do not want to miss. You want to go there.
Yeah, you don't want to mess it up.
No,
don't want to mess it up. Well, thank you again for tuning in, listening wherever you're listening to this. If you like what you're hearing, go ahead and give us some stars, give us a review. Check us out on beanstuff.com. One thing I wanted to add that I thought was interesting is I worked on the website about a week ago, and I came to you and I said, "Hey, does this look good?" And your first response was not, "Oh, visually this looks good," or something. The first response was, the beans in the background are a little bit dark. and so we had to adjust the beans in the background.
That's right. It's important stuff.
So if you want to see what Paul decided was the okay beans, and he wasn't 100% pleased, but what we had, go to beanstuff.com. You can also listen to our podcast from there. Obviously, you're listening to it at the moment, so you can listen to it wherever you get your podcast.
It's not a bad idea, actually. We should do a podcast on dark, light, medium roast. That's a whole topic in itself.
I know. That's
exploded in the last 5 years.
And I just saw in your notes here about decaffeinated coffee. That's kind of... I'm excited about that one.
Okay.
Too.
It's exploded in the last few years now, too.
But, so yeah, feel free to check us out on beanstuff.com. Also, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, check us out on Twitter it's at bean_stuff. And then we also have a Facebook page at Beanstuff Podcast. So check all those places out. Feel free to contact us via any of those methods. And thank you for listening. Bye.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.